Alright, another draft physics video presentation. You know, give up mode. Just a starting point. So, no rational comments at all regarding what I've, essentially demonstrated, proven in a sense. I've proven reason for doubt. No doubt about that. I've provided more than enough evidence that there's reason to doubt the conventional theory regarding two-slit phenomenon, or whatever you want to call that, wave interference being the cause of what light does in circumstances. I don't know how to two-slit circumstances, impediment circumstances, whatever you want to call it. That the light doesn't interfere with itself, it doesn't interfere with each other, that it in fact is just simply broken because it has very big polarization, and the little bits each individually hit different electrons and they're sent to different locations, and you have to reconstruct photons that by restoring the most important thing, phase. If they're out of phase, you can't get the frequency back and you're not going to have a photon. Simple as that. Like I said, there's just no rational conversation to be had. The troll, the cowboy, has made another video that's just unwatchable. It's just jokes and bullshit, and you're just like, well, if you can't make a stand-up argument, then what's the point? You're supposed to be this, you're on the side of right, and you can't make a rational, reasonable argument. You can't just make a statement without getting into whatever little sissy poetry and shit. Really bad jokes. I mean, what's the fucking point? Too stupid. I'm not wasting my time with arguments that dumb. And especially I'm not going to waste my time with arguments like, diffraction is when I put a wave that's, got noise in it, it's clearly disturbed in other ways, into a slit, and then say, oh, garbage in, garbage out. And I'll make fun of the principle of garbage in, garbage out like it's not a real thing. I mean, it just doesn't, there's no sense to it. So if this is what people do when they think they're right, is cheat. And they think the evidence, like, and again, it's a gang, it's one against, the world. And the world can't make a reasoned argument. I mean, all they can do is, like I said, slander, buffoon, do bullshit. Why don't they actually take Photoshop my head and have it spin around? I mean, what's the fucking point? They can't make a reasoned argument. That's all they got, and it's pretty pathetic. Considering all the advantages they're cheating with in this fight. Just to take more, to steal more advantage, it's pathetic. So anyway, so the Skyram guy who just disappeared from the comment section, I never blocked him till now. He just wimped out. He made some kind of comment on the trolls video, and it's so typical. They lose the argument, and then all they have is insults. And that's all you people have. That's all you got. Puro goes disappearing into doing whatever he's doing, his little bubble universe bullshit. Doesn't deal with any of these facts about all the assumptions that underlie conventional notions. And he just doesn't care. The truth, who cares? The fact that physics got it wrong, who cares? We have a nice fantasy story and we're sticking with it. And I just thought intelligent people would be better than that, frankly. So I've been wrong before in overestimating the decency of human beings. I certainly have a personal tendency to be biased in their negative direction, assuming, yes, apparently I am the only reasonable person and they're all fucking idiots. And they just are doing everything they can to verify that intuition. By not showing that they have any balls or character at all. And that does surprise me, like I said, because I just assumed I was being a little bit vain and preposterous and thinking I was so much better than they are. But they clearly are deplorable, petty, useless pieces of shit. I mean, intelligent people aren't your friend, okay, because they don't care about the truth. They don't have anything called integrity, but you can't call them out. They just spout their bullshit with their little authoritarian badges. You know, have a PhD or some other bullshit, and they think they're above it, and they don't have to fight for anything. They can just declare the territory, and they don't have to defend what is obvious cheating that's gone on. You know, they inherited it. They didn't earn their physics. They just inherited it from a long line of assumptions. You know, a bunch of assholes who inherited it, gave it to somebody else who inherited it, gave it to somebody else who inherited it. It's a lineage of just, my teacher says so. And it doesn't have any more integrity than that, because when you really look at the evidence, it sucks. I've said that from the very beginning, and I can't get one of these feeble-minded, lying scum to admit that obvious truth, that the evidence should be better for the aggressiveness of physics's declarations of truth. So I'll play a little bit of the Shakar video, because it has a subtitle, Heisenberg uncertainty principle. When I saw the word uncertainty, I'm just like, they don't have any respect for that word, because they don't recognize where it's appropriate. And it's certainly appropriate in terms of drawing all these conclusions based on a seems like perception. Oh, it seems, it looks a little like, therefore it is. And it's that obviously bad science. They have declared it certain, nail in the coffin evidence, all of this crap, and they won't admit, oh, wait a minute, now this is way short of, we haven't come close to proving a case, and only by our rhetoric have we proven it. Well, we can say things, no particle model can explain. Well, none that you've listened to, clearly, none that you paid any attention to, and that's the standard. The standard isn't that they can make these absolute statements with any integrity. And it's just everywhere. The whole LIGO thing, we can see, 1/10,000th of the diameter of a proton. A preposterous statement. That can't be based on any reasoning skills at all. I mean, there's just no way to make that make sense. Anyway. So, no comments, except thanks for taking the time for my question. You cleared up a lot for me today, but I'll definitely be binge watching your videos to get a better understanding. Thanks again. Yeah, it's like I said, the only ones you gotta watch, I did 4 videos earlier in the week or whatever it was. Gravity, magnetism, charge, and light. And those 4 cover a lot of the material. Anyway, and they're current. Like I said, some of my past conclusions or approximations, my past reasoning had some flaws in it, and it's gotten better and better, and pieces are more in the right order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G kind of thing. It's getting better and better. Clearly on this 2-slit subject, it's certainly gotten very clear. The key thing is understanding the polarization argument. So just make it clear again. These are things they know, okay, about light, that it does have polarization. So whatever this stupid thing they draw, their dopey little double helix little wave traveling through space, well, you got to know this thing has to have a length. It's got to, okay? It has a frequency, so it must have a length. And there's some portion of this thing that really is the on-off. That's the bit that makes it a photon of some kind, the compression or the relaxation, whatever you want to call it. The field moving, the field vibrating. Well, this is a field vibration, a field vibration, a field vibration. So we know it has to have a length. And these numbers are, like I said, huge by comparison. I mean, the polarization alone is 2,000 atoms worth of polarization. So how can we reasonably think this thing is somehow hitting one electron inside of those 2,000 atoms. It's a tiny amount of space. For this whole thing to hit just one electron doesn't make any sense at all. It clearly can't be doing that. And we have the evidence that the only thing that really receives photons, that is, that'll send one back to you, is a surface, is a piece of matter that actually does have a lot of atoms. And that's the only thing we can reflect this stuff off of. So that's another giveaway that this has something to do with the matter reacting and the fact that it's going to send back something that's coherent to you from your position. And I would argue that this really has to do with, there's a lot of these little photons emitted, and what you're getting back is a percentage of them. That actually, when something says is it's 10% reflective, that really means that 10% of the photon is reflected. 10% of it. The real photons are actually broken by that 10% number. That 10% of the photon actually does break off. 10% of these little nodes, these little dots, actually end up flying back somewhere. And then some percentage of that 10% is what you get in your eye. But I mean, it's the only reasonable way to look at it. I mean, there's no other way to change these proportions. Like I said, this polarization of the light is huge. It can't be something that happens to individual little tiny electrons. Electrons are 1,000,000 times smaller than these atoms. Realistically, it's just no chance that one electron has any relationship to a whole photon. So right there, the thing doesn't make any sense. Just the mechanical facts make this idea of the wave interacting with one single electron just a nonsensical, useless notion. Alright, so then we have the the evidence I've provided for this notion that you have a two-slit experiment and they draw this bulge. Okay, oh, that's with one slit open. And then they always draw it in a different location, which is kind of silly when this whole thing is 1 millimeter, right? You can't, they're right on top of each other. There's no, so if I have the other slit open, this is what I'm going to get. And if I have this slit open, this is what I'm going to get. And the trick is that what the evidence demonstrates, what the Veritasium video demonstrates is that the other pattern, when the two slits are open, I'm getting extra light. Okay, I didn't lose this. I got more back in the sense that the two on top of each other, I end up with a pattern, okay, that is on top of that pattern. And that's what the evidence indicates, is that there's, I shouldn't draw one there because that's the 0. So, it's diminishing as it gets towards the edges, gets smaller. And they'll draw it like this, like there's a real 0 here, and a real 0 here, and a real 0 here. Alright, but that 0 doesn't happen. That 0 doesn't exist as a reality. The evidence indicates, no, that's just something they think happens. It's not something they know happens through evidence. Okay, that's just something they assumed. Somebody told them that's what it was. When they looked at it, that was their interpretation. When they looked at the pattern, they said, oh yeah, that's what's really happening. When they didn't really do this cover one slit thing and then cover the other slit. Because, see, if you use low enough light, you'll get a pattern, okay, where you'll see you'll seem quite dark, okay, between these spots. It'll seem quite dark here, and quite dark, and quite dark here, quite dark here. Alright, but that only happens because you have so little light going through that this hump thing didn't happen. Okay, so if you did cover one of the slits when you were getting that clear pattern, you would get nothing, nothing, and then you get nothing again because you were not getting enough light through the slits. So you wouldn't get any humps to build anything out of. And so it's just a misunderstanding, these little technical details. I mean, these are the technical details that they just couldn't care less. They just don't want to pay any attention to. And they're critically important to the assumption, because if this was actually zero, I mean, if you could actually show that, yes, there was light there when one slit was open, and now when I open the other slit, I somehow destroyed those photons. I stopped them from getting there. I mean, if they could actually demonstrate that, that's a profound fact. That's, we were just saying, how did the hell does that happen? They must interfere in this space somewhere, because how could they interfere on the surface? That doesn't make any sense. How does one photon undo the other photon? Are they anti-photons? Is that the magic? So again, it's a profound yes. Okay, this is really important. If this is a fact, it's really an important fact. But it turns out it's not a fact. It turns out the evidence doesn't. Like the two experiments I showed don't demonstrate that happens. All right, so I mean, where's the evidence that that's actually the truth? That in a circumstance where you have enough light to see the humps, that you actually do get a pattern that has an absolute zero here, and a zero here, and a zero here. 0, 0, 0. This is not what the evidence shows. Alright, so we'll move on. You know, I've pointed out how the radar experiment demonstrates, you can clearly see it's just jamming the signal. There's no need for a wave interference theory. Again, the polarizing filters, I've been over that one. So all of the experiments corroborate the existence of reason to doubt. So at minimum, you should have reason to doubt their theory, because they can all be explained by other mechanisms. It's not nail in the coffin evidence. They don't have this zero. That would be real hard evidence. They don't have it. Just like they haven't repeated the Eddington experiment from space. They don't have their hard evidence that light is bent by gravity. So what I did want to do is I'll just, I'll say reply here and just post the comment in here. This should be the Skyram's comment. How come it didn't post? Well, I said post. Somehow it's not in the paster. So I'll put it in the paster. Now it should paste. There it is. Alright, so he says, it is a truth of objective fact. So again, with these terminology, there's no such thing as facts that are clean, you know, undeniable kind of things, not subject to interpretation, that this chalk moved from point A to a point B, that it changed its location in space, and there's no subjective tainting of the experiment. All viewers can see the same thing. All viewers will see the same thing. It's just kind of horseshit to say it's not what it is. So we're going to just say no point in having a distinction between bias and subjective, you know, from personal perspective, and something that we know is happening regardless of perspective. So we're just going to play this game that you make reality. So they'll believe that if there are two simultaneously events, two events that happen at exactly the same time, they've been engineered to happen at exactly the same time, you're going to play this game that because some viewer heard it at a different time, that therefore it's not a fact that they happen at the same time. So, you know, they just play with language. They hate the word objective. For some reason, it scares them. Anyway, that only physics Jesus. So what's the point to this kind of crap? Exactly. I mean, and you're an unaccountable troll. You have no identity for me to make fun of. You don't have, I can't Photoshop you. I can't play the same games with your identity. And so what's the point to this shit? Is that's a counter argument. You're on the side of right, and this is what you have to resort to. It's like a cop. You got the gun, you got the law on your side, you got a union, you got all this stuff, and yet you still have to behave like a fucking asshole? You know, you're just such a petty fuck. Alright, ballless. You're just such a fucking nutless piece of shit. anyway, is able to perfectly represent physical reality. So the argument isn't anything perfect. I'm just asking you to concede the existence of reason to doubt, that you're not a science denier, okay? If you sit there and observe the real evidence and say the real evidence doesn't indicate that zero, okay? When Veritasium did the experiment with the $7,000 device, he couldn't get that zero to show up. And it's a fact. In the other experiment where they actually did cover the slit, it's the truth that unless they oversaturated the image, you didn't see the humps. Those are the facts. You just hate facts, right? And you have to mock them, okay, as representing physical reality. You know, perfectly represent physical reality. It's just you're going to testify honestly or you want to testify dishonestly. So they don't mind that the physicists have no clue what they're talking about. I mean, which I can demonstrate. They really haven't looked at the patterns with much detail. I mean, I can show this one over and over and over again. And they'll keep asserting that because their mathematics says this is gradually on and off, that each one of these little dots of light is actually shaped like this. Okay, that it gradually gets brighter and brighter, and then it gradually gets to the peak brightness, and then it gradually goes down. They couldn't be smoother, as a matter of fact. I mean, they just couldn't be more consistently one intensity. And yet I'm going to be told, and they're going to insist that you're not allowed to see that. You're not allowed to look at it and say, I can't see where that's gradually on and off. It looks like a little on bit, and then there's an off line, and then there's an on bit and an off line, and there's no indication of any gradual anything. But they're going to insist that you're some sort of fool, an idiot, if you look at that and say, yeah, I just don't see what your math says is there. All right. Physical reality on a board. Okay, it is able to perfectly represent philosophical reality on a board. I don't know what that means. Yeah, you're able to draw physics. You can draw squares, you can draw cubes, you can draw spheres, you can do all kinds of things you can represent quite accurately in images. Images are really powerful things. 1,000 words in a single picture kind of thing. And he's mocking it. He's mocking the tool of drawing a picture of it. So if you diagram, like you take 12 Angry Men or some kind of thing, they use a diagram of the apartment to demonstrate that the guy couldn't get there in 15 seconds. And, you know, so if you actually detail it and draw it and landscape it and show it, that's being a buffoon and an idiot. Those are retards. We only represent things with mathematics because it's always right? It always gets the right answer, right? Screw this. This isn't the right answer. The math says what this is. Reality doesn't say what it is. A picture of it doesn't say what it is. The math will tell you the real truth. I mean, it's this bad. This is how bad human beings are. They're so devoted to their religion, you know, that they can't be at all honest. I mean, not a shred of decency runs through their veins and says to them, really, I shouldn't be making these stupid arguments. I shouldn't be defending this bad science. And here I am doing it. I mean, you have no shame, right? Sky Rami. None? Okay. Therefore, every professor that has drawn the double slit experiment is a liar. Well, they're stupid or they're a liar. Which one do you want? They're either completely ignorant of the facts, which is obvious, or they know the facts and they just really couldn't care less. So which is it? I mean, again, they're going to say that there's no pattern here, right? They're going to say, this pattern doesn't have anything to do with the two-slit pattern. This is a diffraction pattern. And the two-slit experiment, it looks exactly the same, except the center is the normal size. It's only one little notch, and it's not as bright. But other than that, it's the same shit. But let's pretend, oh no, it's not the same thing at all. It's a different phenomenon entirely. And that's supposed to make sense to somebody. That's supposed to be, well, yeah, that's the reasonable interpretation. This is completely different. Completely. You know, I mean, you're just so despicable. All right. All right, a liar. So again, I have said the word liars in cases just because clearly, I mean, you're saying there's no way he could be this ignorant that he's never even looked at a two-slit or a single-slit experiment. He has no clue what they really look like. I mean, come on. I mean, there's a point where it begs credulity to say anything else but a liar, because you're saying there's no way he could be that fucking ignorant. How the fuck could they have a physics course where you're not even required to look at the experiments at all? I mean, that doesn't seem possible, but apparently that's the way they want it. When physics Jesus, so he has to do it again for some stupid reason. Like, what is that? What exactly is that? I'm making an argument, all right, based on observations that are quite upfront and honest. I'm just saying, honestly, your explanation, in my opinion, is silly. Okay, I went and I looked at the evidence to see there's got to be a rational explanation, because this explanation they're providing is too silly. And where have I done anything Jesus-like or miraculous or anything posing as a preacher or posing as somebody trying to sell something? I'm only trying to resolve my own dissidence over living in a world run by idiots who say silly things and pray to them. It looks like a fucking totem pole to me. Your physics looks like a totem pole. It's full of little hobgoblins and boogeymen. And I'm really saying I don't see that in the world anywhere, okay? I don't see all this magic and mystical, shamanistic, the squirrel is just pretending he's really a demon, just looking like a squirrel. I don't really play that. And so I'm going to look for a better answer than your fucking gremlin theory. Draws double slit experiment. He doesn't limit himself to the simple case where the slit width is about the size of the wavelength. So here we go again. The size of the wavelength is insanely small. And fine, if you're saying the double slit experiment should only be done one way, that is where no pattern exists, because you have the slit so small there's not even any light getting through, barely. That's your prerogative, okay? But frankly, it's not the interesting pattern. And it's not at all, it doesn't even show the fact that there's two patterns. And it doesn't even get to your point about this whole light plus light equals dark. That never even happens, okay, if I do that. So you don't even have your opportunity to say with one slit closed or with the other slit closed. You can't even play that game. All right, because there's so little light. All right. He draws all physical realizable slit experiments in the multiverse. So we're supposed to sit there and not talk about the fact that, through my own investigation, I mean, I was as ignorant as the rest of you, okay, going in to what was causing the effect. I mean, you look at the pattern, there's two patterns here. You're saying, what the hell's happening here? And, I was looking at it and saying, okay, there's two patterns, right? I mean, you got this group, and then you got this group, and this group, so that's a pattern. And then you got the little stuff in between. So that's a reality. And you're saying, well, what's causing that reality? What's the mechanism? And then what you find out is that you can use one theory will fit all. Unlike their theory, where they have to change the math for each circumstance, like the diffraction gradient has to use one kind of math, the two slit has to use another kind of math, and the single slit has to use a different kind of math. You can just use one theory and answer all the questions, and it really just has to do with this distance. And then the two slit, I mean, I can place Shakar saying it. I mean, look, in the single slit, it's the variable is the size of the opening, and in the double slit, the variable is the size of the impediment. Because what are those two things have in common? What does a slit opening and an impediment have in common? Oh, the distance between the surfaces, right? I mean, that's what the two have in common, right? They have exactly the same distance between the surfaces. And so you figure this out. You figure out that that's what's really deciding the pattern. And so what you're really just looking for are surfaces and how far apart they are. And so then you can find a mathematics that is just as simple as it could be, in the sense that all you're doing is saying these two surfaces that are closest, they create a pattern. Okay, they do this. And then these two surfaces are further apart, and as you go further apart, the lines get longer, so to speak, and that means the frequency changes, phase. You go from unphased to off phase more often, and so the second set of sets is doing that. And then you could have a third set, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth. And if you did that, what you end up building is a little pyramid, right? A little tiny slit, and then you have a little bigger slit. I drew this already, and then a bigger slit, and they're all lining up in phase in one location. And then they'll go way out of phase, okay? As you go further and further away, so it'll be way out of phase here, right? Say if I draw this one here, you can sort of understand that this one will start here, so they won't line up anymore. And then, you know, they'll all be, this one's going to be way off, and this one will be way off, and so they're not going to line up anymore. But when you go a certain distance, they'll all line up again, and you get this. And so in the diffraction gradient, you know, the thing with just the lines, this is what you get as a pattern. You get a little circle, a little circle, a little circle, a little circle spread over a very wide area, because that's where they all are in phase again, is where you have a dot of light. So you have to wait a while for them all to go back into phase. And that's the simple math that works for every experiment. So if I just have a single slit, it works. It explains the pattern. These two angles, okay, where does it go back in phase? That's all you need to say. Where are the phases in alignment? Okay, single slit, double slit. Where are these four sources in alignment? Okay, these four sources. This, 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 this. Where do the four sources come into alignment? And that's where you're going to get your little bars. And then you can have more and more, and as you add them, that's all it is. So you don't, nothing has to interfere in space here. Nothing at all. Just has to do with scattering the photons on these surfaces. By scattering the bits of the photon, you're sending a piece from one photon here, and a piece from another photon here, and a piece from another photon here, and a piece from another photon here, and you're making a new photon out of the pieces of the old photons. Simple explanation, and it works. And instead of just conceding that, well, maybe conventional physics might be wrong, they'll just attack. You're a science-denying fool, a moron, an idiot, okay, because you see the logic of this, and you don't see the logic of their magical waves interfering, force interfering with a force, which there's no example of forces interacting with forces. You could shine laser beams at each other all day and you won't get them to bounce off of each other. Why not? Because it's not physically possible. That's why not. Alright. So he draws all physically realizable slit experiments. I draw the rational experiments that we know exist. So we know the diffraction gradient exists. We know the double slit exists. We know the 3 slits exist, 4 slits. We know that 1 slit exists. So yeah, the theory should cover all those experiments. And it should cover them with the same principles. And it shouldn't change the rules from experiment to experiment. It shouldn't play a game that a single slit is diffraction and a double slit is some other kind of thing. You know. All right. in the multiverse. So again, I don't believe in any multiverses. So you're just saying, isn't that sort of a joke against your own physics? You're the people who invented the fake dimensions and the fake functions and the fake dimensions. That's not my theory. That's your silly theory, the multiverse. That's a silly notion made up just as much as they've made up the idea of that zero that doesn't exist. They've made up this notion of dimensions that don't exist, let alone universes that don't exist. All right, with perfect accuracy, of course, regardless of whether it's accurate or not, you could disprove it. Okay, you could show how, well, no, the Veritasium video isn't good evidence. Veritasium's an idiot and a fool and a moron. He couldn't do the experiment right. Even with a $7,000 device that does all the work for you, now he's too much of a buffoon and moron, and he couldn't do it right. I mean, you can make counter arguments, but I think they're going to be pretty lame. Yeah. Anyway, so you just don't care about the truth. You just don't care that the evidence is weak for your theory, and every day gets stronger for my theory, and you just don't care. That doesn't mean anything to you. Evidence doesn't mean anything. That's all you're screaming loud and clear. I don't care what the evidence says. I'm going to believe in my fairies. All right. With perfect accuracy, of course, because our minds are far inferior. No, your character is far inferior. You're weasels and liars and pukes. I mean, you're a disgusting human being. Again, you can't concede the obvious. That, yeah, it would be really good if they repeated the Eddington experiment with a decent telescope. And it'd be really excellent if they did it from space. Instead of just saying those simple things, conceding, I wish the evidence was better for the theory I'm defending. Instead, you go on in attack mode, okay, and play this fucking slimy game, you fucking weasel. So, I mean, so that's what you're demonstrating. I guess, it is true that your mind is inferior in the sense that I don't think it's working very well. I think you are just kind of a psychotic, self-absorbed, delusional fucktard, because the evidence is clear. The evidence isn't strong enough for conclusions. It's indicating there needs to be a great deal of debate over whether or not we can find a piece of evidence that is declarative one way or the other. And those pieces of evidence can't be fantasy experiments that were never performed, like the detector experiments they cite. I mean, you should be able to concede some of this, and you can't concede anything. It just demonstrates, of course, your mind is inferior. Because, of course, the evidence is overwhelming that you don't have enough evidence on your evidence table. You keep pointing to it. Look at our evidence. There's nothing on the table, for fuck's sake. All right. To the... because our minds are far inferior to the mind of the physics genius. Well, again, maybe we should write that on your tombstone, because it seems like, yeah, you're kind of proving the point. I'm clearly far superior to you in the sense that I'm not falling for silly shit, and I'm certainly obviously defending, yeah, let's go where the evidence goes, which seems like a good idea, and you seem to be obnoxiously saying exactly the opposite. I don't fucking care what the evidence is. That's what you're saying, loud and clear. Mind of physics genius, Jesus. So he did it again. We are unable to grasp the infinite complexity. So I'm arguing exactly the opposite, right? Isn't this the funniest part? I mean, I am titled the fucking physics, 2 + 2 + 2 physics. It doesn't have all your complexity. It doesn't have 500-mile-long equations. It doesn't have a bunch of symbols that aren't representative. It doesn't sit there and play a game like Volkswagens driving down the road have a frequency. It doesn't have any of that crap, and it certainly doesn't have all your entanglement and all the other extrapolations that you piled onto your wooey magical physics. It's 2 forces, 2 kinds of matter, and 2 kinds of interaction, and that's all there is. And you're saying infinite complexity. I'm asking you to grasp something infinite complex. No, not even close to the truth, right? I mean, see, these are just such preposterously stupid statements you're making. I mean, they're so obvious straw man crap. All right. Of his holy illustrations. So again, the illustrations couldn't be simpler. They're little straight lines going to a point. You can't follow along these illustrations. You can't follow along. All right, anyway, simpletons like us, I mean, scum like you, so let's just say it right. Scumatons, right? Scumatons like us can only come to the conclusion that he is a crackpot. So, and then you've proven it with what? Oh, you've proven it with slander. That's it. And you're a crackpot if, you know, this is what he calls being a crackpot. So again, we'll go back to the wave tank, because that's one apparently they keep defending. Even the hero keeps defending. So you have a simple experiment, right? And we know how water, okay, we know that when water goes through a wave, you know, a wave goes through water, a barrier, water, that what happens is the water sticks to the surface, okay? It sticks. And so what happens is this wave goes in, but the wave starts to bend as it goes through because it's interfering with the surfaces. Okay, the surfaces are pulling on these waves in the sense that this piece of water is going slower than this piece, and then it goes faster and faster and faster. So this piece stays going fast. These pieces of water are slowed down the most, and everything else is just something in between. And that's why the water bulges when it comes out. The wave bulges because it's slowed down because of friction. Now, he's saying that screw doing the experiment this way, okay? Because see, this won't show any diffraction or interference. What I should be doing is putting the water waves in like this. So I should bounce the water off another tapper here. I should have all kinds of interactions with the water so the water gets all jiggly, okay, and all the waves are broken into pieces. Pieces going this way, pieces going that way, pieces going all kinds of directions, and then put it into the slit, because then I'll get the real answer. This is a lie, okay? They're saying this is a lie. Water doesn't do that. Water does this and this and this, because you have to put this in. That's how bad their argument is. They're defending this as the natural state of water. Okay, this. They're saying that these agitated waves are just like photons. Okay, photons going into two slits. Yeah, photons are really doing this when they go into the two slits. Yeah, that's really the right answer. I mean, it's so pathetic that you're just saying, how can these people do this? How can they defend such absolute nonsense? How desperate are they? And you're saying, why are they so desperate? Why are they so invested in the shikars and in the I was going to say Alex Jones, because yeah, he's almost, you might as well be a physicist. Alex Jones might as well be a physicist. It's so bad. It's so made the fuck up. Sean Carroll, Brian Greene, the whatever Al Shakira guy or whatever the hell his name. I forgot his name. Sorry. You know, I can play the Professor Lewin. I just play their videos. I can show the phoniness and the fakeness, and they'll just sit there and pretend, no, that's my God. You can't point out how he could be wrong. They can't be wrong. All right, because the minds are far inferior. Okay, we are unable to grasp. We already did that. Crackpot. Okay, that is the burden of having magnificent blue eyes. So again, this obsession with this little personal shot somehow. Again, they really are that envious. You know, that all this is really about is they just hate me. See, they don't even love physics, right? They just hate me because I have blue eyes and blonde hair, and that is evil. I'm obviously a Nazi. I'm obviously, you know, trying to be a master race or something, and They just can't stand it. Is that it? I mean, is that what this is all about? Alright, they can see through the deep fabric of space-time. No, what I just have is, obviously you don't have, is that I'm on this planet trying to sincerely be a decent human. And as part of the process of being a decent human and not trying to make any trouble, not trying to be a problem, is that you take things as truth. You sit there and try to find the truth, because the truth will set you free, so to speak. It's not a bad phrase. One of the few, obviously the truth in some biblical sense isn't any good, but yes, facts are really great things, and getting them right and respecting them is a really great thing. And so I kind of know if I'm not going to be an asshole, I have to know what an asshole is. Stuff like that. So that's all I've done. And there's no evidence I'm doing anything else here. And you're pretending there's some other kind of bullshit. But see through the deep fabric of space-time. Again, bringing up stuff that for which there is no evidence. Just pointing out. Even in their slanderous rhetoric, they're just so obvious in the sense that I'm not the one defending your space-times and your multiverses. That's your nonsense. You shouldn't be making jokes about me, okay, by inserting your own failures, your own weaknesses. So anyway, just such a garbage. So we'll cancel that. So anyway, I mean, but what a pussy, You could have typed that crap here, made it clear. But no, he goes over to a troll video to play this game. And again, in a video that's denying the evidence, just not in any way accounting for the existence of the evidence that isn't consistent with their theory. And they just don't care to account for it at all. And it's really unfair. I have to account for everything, they have to account for nothing. I mean, it's so obviously imbalanced. Alright. So this should be this again. This is the Shakar video. So we'll play some of this and then get the hell out of here. So here he's essentially, he's talking about the single slit. So here he points out how it's just diffraction, blah, 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 blah. The round hump kind of thing. No fringes. So now he's going to explain the single slit again because some student asked a question. So
I could think of many little point sources, right? In the forward direction.
See, so this is the famous line I always love. They just go in the forward direction and draw a line through the middle of the slit, right? So now they've bisected the single slit into two slits by just drawing a line. I mean, there's nothing to indicate there's any reason to believe the light is being broken into two separate waves, but just by drawing that line, now I can do Huygens, because now I can make two waves. But that's all he did. He just drew a line in the forward direction, splitting the slit into two slits. I mean, it's hilarious. It's so obvious.
If you go very far, so you treat them as roughly parallel, they are all in step. You get a big maximum. In another direction, where this difference is lambda.
So obviously, only a percentage of the photons are broken by the edges of the slit. Some get through and go right to the target and make it very bright. So that's kind of obvious. And other photons, though, are going to be altered by first hitting the slit. Some of them, half their polarization might be over the slit, and so half the photon gets wiped out. And then others, the little bits, are going to be hitting electrons, and by hitting electrons, they're going to get scattered. And they'll scatter in all directions, but only certain directions will the phase realign. And if you realign the phase, you can take parts from one photon and align them with parts from another photon, as long as the phase lines up.
D sine theta equals lambda. This guy and this guy are differing by lambda over 2.
See, it's just made it up, right? There's just no reasoning why this spot is in the middle. Nothing. He says there's a bunch of point sources. The only one I'm going to pay attention to is this one right here in the middle, though. The one that bisects the single slit into two slits. But there's no logic. There's no reasoning why a light ray would say I must split into two waves.
So you're assuming the slit is large enough
These are little mathematical dots inside the slit.
Mathematical dots. They're not real dots, right? So, again, it's just such jargon. They're just little mathematical concepts. They don't have anything to do with the reality. They just make it possible for us to draw something almost accurate. But it wouldn't be possible without them, because the waves are actually in the wrong location. The actual fact is that the locations the math uses and gets it right. If you want to get the answer right, you use this position and this position. The distance between the slits is what you use in the math, because that's the distance, that's the only distance that matters. Because this isn't about how much wave goes through, it's just about at what angles the pieces will arrive at the same location in phase. And that's all.
You know, when you make a slit, every point on the slit looks like a source of light, a point source of light.
So, you know, the light bulb is a point source of light. And then if I get away from a distance from the light bulb, then each one of the photons are now a point source of light, right? And then I could go further away and I could say each one of those is a point source of light. And then I could go further away and say each one of those is a point source of light. I mean, it just makes no sense at all. No, they're each individual places that a ray of light, it's a path the ray could or could not travel. It may or may not, depending on time. Sometimes you roll snake eyes, sometimes you roll boxcars. So yes, sometimes the photon will be traveling this way, and sometimes it'll travel that way, and sometimes it'll travel that way. The bits.
They're not really light bulbs, but if you make any hole in the wall and light comes through, that hole looks like it's a source of light. I'm taking every point on the hole to be a source of light.
Right, and we know it's not possible. We know that the inverse square law has already decided that those points of those sources are rays, and those rays are not infinite, and there's, you know, so there's already only so many photons coming through, so there's no way to sit there and just arbitrarily say, I'll just create an infinite number of point sources inside of a finite space. I mean, it's so bad as an explanation.
And what I'm saying is there is a direction in which it will cancel, but if you go a little further out, it won't cancel completely.
So it doesn't even make any sense. You go a little further out, it won't cancel completely. It just doesn't, you know, it's out in phase, out of phase, in phase, out of phase. And so he's conceding some little bit, and it's just, again, this is just, he's never really seen a single slit pattern.
This is the direction for perfect cancellation, where I can pair them, this one with this one, that one with that one, and so on. They pair to give 0. But if you move further up, you no longer cancel completely, but you don't add perfectly either, so things will get better, then they'll get worse again, and better and worse, and so on. So that's the origin of that pattern. Yeah.
So let's understand what he described. This is what he's describing. I mean, it's a clearly strong pattern. To sit there and just pretend it's nothing, it's irrelevant, it's superfluous, it's all of this stuff is just doesn't mean anything, not really important. Yeah, sorry, I can't quite hear the question.
For single slit diffraction, the big thing in the middle is pretty much all you have.
So that's, you know, why would he explain it that way, right? I mean, when you know this is the pattern, why would you say the big thing in the middle is all you have? When you know that all I have to do is make the slit wider and I get lots of bars, lots of them. And then eventually, you know, the bars will get so small. If I make the slit wider, they get so small that I run out of light, you know, very quickly. Okay, because they're really small little bars. So it gets smaller and smaller. The pattern on the wall will be in a smaller and smaller space, but there's more and more bars inside of it. And you know, that's the correlation, and we know it all just has to do with how far apart those slits are. Because if I do it with an impediment, I'll get exactly the same pattern. So if I use it, you know, except the bright middle won't be there because I'm using an impediment. So the difference is the distance of the slits. I'll get the same size bars if I use my finger this way, or if I make a slit that's as open as my finger. I get exactly the same pattern, same size bars. And the only difference will be, yeah, obviously with one of them I'm going to get a very bright thing in the center, and with the other one I'm not going to get that bright thing in the center because I've blocked all the center light. So I'm going to get a much more even little string of bars. But that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get exactly the same pattern. This and this will create the same pattern. I mean, it's that obvious.
It's not like a double slit experiment with 2 holes where you get many times the pattern.
So he just said it. It's not like that. It's not like that, except it's just like that, except we don't have, this one isn't dead, right? If I want to make this a double slit pattern, all I have to do is like make this one go away, and make this one go away, and then make this one go away, and make this one go away, and I have the double slit pattern. And obviously I have to make this smaller, so I just have to make this the same size as the rest of them. But that's all. Those are the only changes you make, and it's the same pattern. And he's pretending it's a huge, some kind of real substantial difference. There's no real huge difference. The mechanism is obviously the same mechanism. Obviously the same mechanism.
It's because, let's understand why that is true. Here, if these two differ by 1 wavelength, they don't differ at all. I can find another angle where they differ by 2 wavelengths. They don't differ at all.
Right, exactly. It's just about putting them back in phase. And again, but we do know that you can't do it with these two. 2 won't work. The math won't work. If you want to make the math work, you got to use 4 sources. Surprise, surprise.
There's only 2 sources. So you can
So again, 2 sources won't work. There's no math from 2 sources that creates the double slit pattern. Doesn't work. 4 sources works.
Engineer them to differ by either 1 wavelength or 2 wavelengths or 3 wavelengths. Here, in a single slit, each point is like a source of light.
So again, why wouldn't each point be a source of light in the double slit inside of the single slit? So again, this hypocrisy. Simple question. How does the principle change? There's a slit. You're saying certain things. There's a bunch of point sources in the slit. Well, why aren't there a bunch of point sources inside of this slit? I mean, you see, why don't you just draw your directional line right through these 2 slits and then create 4 waves? Now, obviously, your waves will be in the wrong place, so you won't be able to make the math work, because the real distances are these 2 outside surfaces and the 2 inside surfaces, and although those are the only dimensions that matter mathematically.
You got them all to agree. You can get them to agree only in the forward direction. In any other direction, you can get them to neutralize each other, but never for perfect reinforcement. So you cannot get it more than, this is the only real maximum here.
So he just said it. This is the only real maximum here. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. All this is brighter and bigger. But I mean, these are all real maximum. Yeah, I mean, it's just silly to say this one's real, the rest of them are fake. I mean, what does that mean? Can't mean anything logically.
Everything else is tiny, yes.
So what? Who cares how small it is? It's still significant. It's still there, and it has to be accounted for.
No, in double slit, what's happening is in double slit, the number D I used in double slit was not the size of a slit, but the spacing between the slit.
Yeah, see? So they changed a fundamental variable, right? Where you'd say the variable is the opening. And in the double slit, all of a sudden the variable isn't the opening anymore. The variable is the impediment. And how can that make any sense except understanding that the reason why that works at all, I mean, it doesn't really work. Like I said, their math isn't complete because it doesn't get the right answer. As you go further away, it gets wackier and wackier. But anyway, why would it have any hope of being correct? It's because it's about the distance between the surfaces. How far apart the surfaces are dictates how much degree of difference there is between a wavelength on the surface. It tells you how far things will be spaced. Okay, the distance has everything to do with how much territory on the surface you're projecting the image onto, how much territory it takes up, how big a wavelength is. And as you make the distance further and further and further, you make that relationship mean that a tinier and tinier bit of space adds up to a wavelength. So the bars get smaller and smaller. It's probably enough. I mean, it's, you know, it's you know, the flaws and the inadequacies and the incompleteness of his description of the physical experiment is obvious. So it's right there in front of you. You can see him saying things that just don't fit the evidence. And I mean, and they're sure this is the correct answer. Again, without any uncertainty. They're so certain it's the right answer that they'll make fun of anybody who says, I don't really buy that. And that's bad. Yeah, it's really bad that this is the reality. So anyway, yeah, I guess I'll just point out the physicist who was supposed to get back to me never got back to me. So I guess I won't have a physicist to inquire from because he pussied out again. You know, again. I asked him, well, how much will it cost? Blah, blah, blah. And, you know, so he, you know, even, so I think he, you know, somebody must have said to him, oh, there's this guy online who wants to, you know, challenge a physicist. I don't know what he must have said. But I mean, I guess he had to, like all the physicists, are like, oh, yeah, I need your homework help or something. You know, maybe want to sell his time to do homework help or something. But he didn't want to answer any questions. Yeah. Didn't want to be interrogated. Alright, so even for money. So till the next time and such. It's just a dismal task this has become.